The nature of the development of religious and philosophical teachings among the Jews determines the difference between Jewish traditional medicine from Eastern and Western medicine. If European medicine gravitates towards rational arguments, then in JTM, Jewish traditional medicine, rules supported by references to ancient sources, Tanakh, including Torah, prophets and scriptures and other sacred books and traditions, play a big role, which are mentioned in ancient European and ancient Eastern medicine. The principles of maintaining health set forth in the Bible books are ahead of the level of knowledge of the then most civilized country of Egypt and correspond to the ideas of modern medical science. From this we can conclude that this knowledge was given to Moses by divine revelation. The principles of maintaining health given by God to Moshe are described in detail in the Bible. A clear relationship is indicated between the obedience of the Jews to the will of God and human health. Holiness and personal hygiene are inextricably linked, and this was given great importance by the people of Israel. Before appearing to the people of Israel at Mount Sinai, God transmitted the following command through Moses, and God said to Moses, "Go to the people, and sanctify them today and tomorrow, let them wash their clothes in order to be ready for the third day, for on the third day God will descend before the eyes of all the people on Mount Sinai." Acts 19:10-11. Observance of the rules established by God, commandments and observance of all his ordinances was and is the duty of every one Jew. Compliance with the rules of personal hygiene established by God is not only a duty to God, but also a duty to fellow tribesmen, because it has protected and protects from many diseases, illnesses, and epidemics. Today it is the norm for us when infected patients are isolated. Today it is the norm for us when masks are used to prevent the spread of viral and bacterial diseases. Because today we know the ways of their distribution and transmission, but it took centuries for mankind to learn about the transmission of infection by airborne droplets. But God told the people of Israel about this in the wilderness. In God's decree on the maintenance of infected patients, it says, "The leper, on whom this ulcer, should have his clothes torn, and his head should not be covered, he should be covered to the mouth, and shout, 'Unclean, unclean.'" Lev. 13:45, patients with leprosy were isolated from society, so that the disease would not spread further. God gave not only rules for the isolation of infectious patients. Bogdal also rules for disinfection and dissection. He must burn a garment, or a warp, or a weft of wool or linen, or any leather thing on which there will be a sore, for this is caustic leprosy. It must be burned with fire. Leviticus 13 verse 52. The word leper in that sense in which it is used in the Bible includes various infectious diseases. Therefore, Jews with infectious diseases were isolated and their property was burned. At a high temperature, the infection dies. Nowadays, few people doubt how important it is for the human body to receive proper nutrition. Eating fatty foods leads to obesity, excess cholesterol in the blood, and diabetes. In our time, it is known that the use of certain types of fish is dangerous to health. As an example, bottom fish species are rich in heavy metals, some types of mackerel and tuna are rich in mercury, etc. Wrong combination of different foods leads to diseases of the gastrointestinal tract. The impact of nutrition on human health is enormous. Therefore, God gave the Jews the dietary rules of kashrut or Jewish dietology. Moreover, the rules include not only what we eat but also what we drink. God gave alcohol for treatment and not for drunkenness. Infusions, tinctures, elixirs, vodka, extracts from plants and other materials, were used by ancient Jewish doctors to treat patients. The basis of ancient Jewish traditional medicine was the following concept: the doctor has three tools: the word, the plant, and the knife. The word is a prayer to God for a cure, for giving strength to medicines obtained from medicinal plants. Plants are the pharmacy of God, which is given to us by God and is around us. Knowledge of the contents of this pharmacy allows you to study the plan of God and cure a person. The knife and the rules for its use in injuries and wounds are described in great detail in the Bible. Criticism and rejection of the God-given Bible during the Age of Enlightenment deprived the nations of the precious knowledge that God gave to the Jews on Mount Sinai. The Middle Ages were marked by terrible epidemics that arose when the rules of hygiene and sanitation were violated. Until the 19th century, doctors forgot the rules of asepsis and antisepsis. As a result of the spread of nosocomial infections, many patients died from various infections. The doctors forgot the command that God gave to Moses in ancient times, and God said to Moses, saying, "Command the sons of Israel to send out of the camp all the lepers, and all those with discharges, and all those defiled from the dead." Therefore, it is very important that Jewish traditional medicine be practiced by people who study and those who know the Bible. The relationship between obedience to the laws of God and health is indicated in the book of Deuteronomy, "And keep his ordinances and his commandments, which I command you today, so that it may be good for you and your sons after you, and that you spend a long time in this land which God, your God gives you forever." Deuteronomy 4 verse 40. The book of Exodus sets out not only the laws of preserving health transmitted by God through Moshe, but also the consequences of breaking these laws. And he said, "If you obey the voice of God your God, and do what is right before his eyes, and heed his commandments, and keep all his statutes, then not on you any of the diseases that I brought on Egypt, for I am God, your healer." In modern life, a person is faced with various life situations, stress, illness and other problems that negatively affect the state of the soul. As a doctor, I can say that the soul, psychological manifestations, and the human body are interconnected with each other. In the event of diseases, the relationship between emotions and various diseases has been established. When healing from an illness, the relationship between emotions and healing from various diseases was also established. Using knowledge of the relationship between emotions, psychic manifestations, and the occurrence of various diseases, Jewish doctors in antiquity offered guidelines for using corrective emotions to treat illnesses. Here are some examples. Tension, anxiety, anger, impatience cause diseases of the human gastrointestinal system. Correcting emotions, relaxation, consolation, sympathy, patience, help to get healing. Confusion, a feeling of loneliness, anxiety, cause diseases of the central and peripheral nervous system of a person, senile dementia, insomnia, general weakness. Correcting emotions, a sense of pleasure, peace of mind, these emotions help to receive healing. Emotion in the form of a long-lasting feeling of resentment leads to the appearance of changes on the skin, ulcers, warts, acne. Prayers have tremendous healing power that can influence a person. On all paths of life, in all sorrows and illnesses, in joy and sorrow, at any time and in any place, the Jews pray to God. Prayers have tremendous power that can influence a person. With their help, you can be treated for various diseases, not only physical, but also mental. Faith healing is the practice of prayer and gestures, such as the laying on of hands, that seem to bring about divine intervention in spiritual and physical healing. Believers know that healing from sickness and disability can be achieved through religious faith and through prayer or other rituals that believers believe can stimulate divine presence and power. The belief that prayer, divine intervention, can cure illness has been and continues to be popular throughout Jewish history. The resulting recovery is attributed by Jewish traditional medicine, JTM, to a method commonly classified as faith healing. Ancient prayers have great healing power. Every Jew's home contains many books on Judaism, but an even more incredible number of books are found in the synagogues. However, in ancient times there were books that were missing. These books are mentioned in the Torah, Tanakh, literature dedicated to bondage. The Mishnah says that King Hezekiah seized and hid the most famous book on medicine. This book was written by King Shlomo and was called Sefer Refut, the Book of Healings. In this book, King Shlomo outlined the means of Jewish traditional medicine, which help literally from all diseases. The Jews, instead of praying to the Almighty for a cure, simply looked into this book. The sages approved of his actions. People should rely on God and not on a book. King Hezekiah is the 13th king of Judah. He was a very righteous king. Among all the kings of Judah, there was no king who relied on the Creator to such a great extent as Hezekiah. Hizkiah with great zeal was engaged in the dissemination and study of the Torah among the people. The decree of Hizkiah threatened, "He who does not study the Torah deserves the death penalty." According to the legend, King Hizkiah did not destroy the Book of Healings, but buried it, that is, he acted as it is customary to deal with religious texts. And as my grandfather told me, Dr. Ion Berlovich, it is possible that someday the Book of King Solomon will be discovered. Many ancient Jewish books written in Hebrew have not survived to our time. Some were destroyed, some were hidden in the secret libraries of the monasteries. From the books that have come down to us, we learn about the title and content of the books that existed in antiquity. The Zohar calls the Book of Adam, the Book of Hanuk Sefer Refut, and Sefer Yetzirah the Book of Creation. Sometimes we pray, but there is no answer. Like we didn't beg for a good ending. In fact, there are no prayers that go unanswered, we just don't see it right away. In the tractate Sanhedrin, 44b, it is written, "Let a person always precede misfortune with prayer." This can be said about any illness, about any trouble, it is better to pray in advance. So that everything is safe. During prayer, you should be at peace, be calm, so that it turns out thoughtfully and concentrated. Everyone has had moments of mortal danger when the soul in an instant impulse will rush upwards. And even if the petrified lips do not whisper, "God, help," the whole being of a person prays for this, suddenly realizing, only He can save. Such a prayer, aspiring to God from the very depths of the heart and subordinating the whole person now of prayer, is called prayer of the heart. They strive for heartfelt prayer through years of hard work. It is not so easy to subordinate to aspiration upward a body that is always preoccupied with its needs, a mind prone to constant scattering, a heart continuously swaying from the influx of feelings. At the same time, the very technique of concentration and self-control is not an end, but only a means, one of the possibilities to find God. We don't care about Him. He is omniscient, that is, He knows everything. Why should He, the omniscient and merciful, wait for our signals? Of course, this is not what God wants. God does not need our praise, but our heart. But He will not conquer Him with a miracle or a demonstration of His omnipotence. God Himself endowed man with free will, and loving us, honors her, the free will of man. As in any relationship between two persons, here the only adequate response to God's love for us can only be the free will of our love for God. Such are the laws of the universe. A person seems to be happy to love, but only he is not always the master of his heart, his desires. At the moment of danger, when the soul flies like an arrow to God, realizing only in Him is salvation, we not only gather all the forces together. Something no less important happens, we instantly sober up, our smallness, weakness, dependence on God comes to us. This is what humility is. In ordinary life, outside of a crisis, one learns humility, and this is not a one-time act, but spiritual work on oneself. Everyday work. Prayers also teach humility, and they do it without waiting for more merciless teachers to visit us, troubles, misfortunes. Humility in prayer is not only in words of appeal to God. Humility in others. In accepting with all my soul a simple thought, yes, I ask you for the most important thing for me now, but you are higher than me, you know better what I need, you love me more than I love myself, because thy will be done. Not mine, yours, but I only hope for your mercy and love. It happens that an occasional prayer evokes an immediate response in the form of this or that help. This is when a person in some critical situation turns to God with a cry of despair, with all the fire of his heart. In Jewish traditional medicine, JTM, spiritual healing is an extremely intimate, personal, individual matter. The requirements for specialists who dare to enter the field of spiritual healing are high. These people must have faith in God, sufficient spiritual maturity, and responsibility. A strong inner desire to help is essential. Both the doctor and the patient, who have entered into a trust agreement for healing, need to have a strong desire to help and sympathy, a firm confidence in faith in God and a prosperous healing. Spiritual healing and medical treatment combined in one program are especially effective. A feature of Jewish traditional medicine, JTM, from antiquity to the present is spiritual healing and medical treatment combined in one program. God does not send us illnesses, illnesses are sent to us by life, a world permeated with evil. And God makes it so that these diseases, firstly, can be healed, and secondly, they can bring some benefit. A person who has experienced severe suffering, illness, is strengthened in spirit, he can later help those who are also suffering. Illness dulls a person's innate impulses to evil. A person endures the suffering associated with illness. This makes a person capable of accepting first the health of the soul, and then bodily health. God sends us only good things. Man is meant to be healthy. A disease has no meaning, it must be healed. Only what God created makes sense. And evil, sickness, sin have no meaning. God created doctors and their doctoral work. God is the doctor. Any sick person should first turn to God to cleanse himself and correct his life. Without this, medical assistance may be ineffective. Who created the soul, he also created the body, and whoever heals the immortal soul, he can also heal the body. From temporary suffering and illness? Turning to a doctor is not only not prohibited, but also necessary, because God most often gives healing through doctors. In Jewish traditional medicine, JTM, one of the reasons for going to a doctor is a reference to medicinal plants. God endowed only some plants with healing properties. But in the Jewish tradition there is also a special commandment, to consciously take care of health. The fact is that, according to the Jewish outlook on life, not only the soul has holiness, but also the body. The body is a vessel for the soul, it helps it serve God. Therefore, taking care of the health of the body, we take care of the health of the soul. Health care is entrusted by the Torah to the person himself and is counted to him as the fulfillment of a commandment. But there are exceptions to this rule as well. Our wise men said that 1 month a year God himself becomes our doctor. This is the month of Iyar. The name Iyar is an abbreviation of the words Ani Hashem Rofaha, I am the Almighty, your healer. This month, a person is given the opportunity to recover even from those diseases for which medicine has not yet found a cure. You just need to pray and ask for help from the chief doctor himself. The author of the book Noda Beyuda, Rabbi Yechezkel Lando, Noda Beyuda, 5473-5553/1713-1793/, is an outstanding teacher of the law, one of the spiritual leaders of the Jews of Europe, advises those who are ill to read 18 chapters from the book Tehillim, Psalms of David chapters 6, 20, 25, 30, 32, 38, 41, 51, 86, 91,102,103, 107, 116, 118,130,139,142. Prayer is a dialogue. Your request needs to be answered. Of course, if a person with the fullness of his faith, with the fullness of his being, asks, cries out, of course, he will not go unheeded. In this sense, prayer is saving. But some are healed, some are not. Man is a huge system that relates to everything in the world. Therefore, two people suffering from the same disease and having approximately the same level of faith have completely different lives, because in everything else they are completely different. One is healed, the other is not because one prays fervently and the other does not, but there are many other reasons, sometimes very serious reasons. For example, one of the reasons is whether a person wants to get well or not. Many illnesses come from the fact that a person wants to get sick and does not want healing. For him, illness is a way to hide from the world. It often happens that some difficult, unbearable circumstances have fallen on a person, and he falls ill. Many mental illnesses are a way to hide from life. From overexertion, a person hides in illness. The man wanted to take responsibility. Sometimes the reason is that a person does not want to be healed. To be healthy, because you must lead a certain lifestyle, and a person has a more important goal than being healthy. For example, an alcoholic understands that he is destroying himself, but says, "Give me some pill so that I am healthy, but I will not stop drinking." And one more reason, the weakness of prayer. This may mean that a person understands prayer as a kind of spell, a magic pill. Not like talking to God. He does not need God himself, but he needs specific momentary health. There are many examples of this. The provision of medical treatment is an important mission and the fulfillment of the commandment of the Creator, no less, and even more than the provision of any other help to one's neighbor. The law says that you must consult a doctor if necessary. The patient who resists must be forced to be treated. The authorities of the Torah Rambam, Rashba and some other authorities of the Torah believe that in matters related to health hazards, it is forbidden to rely on a miracle, and there is a sacred duty to make every effort within the laws of nature to be cured. By His great mercy, writes Rashba, the Almighty initially created various means in the world known to specialist healers, designed to treat various ailments. The Torah sages write that it is forbidden to rely on miracles, and a person who does not turn to doctors for help commits a severe violation. They should offer prayers to him so that he will make sure that the treatment is successful, and the sick person recovers. And so it is said in the Talmud, he who has someone in his family ill, let him turn to the sage of the Torah to pray for his recovery, from God, his treatment, and from God he receives a gift. The knowledge of the doctor will raise his head, and among the nobles he will be held in high esteem. The Lord made medicine out of the earth, and a prudent person will not neglect them. Everything that I wrote in this book is part of the knowledge that my parents passed on to me, and their parents gave them to them. Many generations of doctors in my and my wife's birth have kept and used this knowledge. The purpose of this book is the development of Jewish traditional medicine, JTM. In the following chapters, I have partially described the principles, methods, and remedies that Jewish doctors and healers have used throughout the ages. Unfortunately, I will probably be able to use and describe all the material from the diaries of my ancestors, which I took out after immigration from the Soviet Union. Information about the methods and means of Jewish traditional medicine, JTM, my ancestors collected for many years. From the history of the Jewish people, it is known that for millennia it was scattered among other peoples. Therefore, Jewish traditional medicine, JTM, while preserving the basic principles laid down in antiquity, described in ancient Jewish sources in the ancient Hebrew language, absorbed many aspects of traditional medicine of the peoples among whom the Jews lived. But it was not just the acceptance and absorption of knowledge. This knowledge was applied, studied, and changed in accordance with the requirements of the laws of the Torah and religion. The Jewish religion plays a big role in the life of the Jewish people. So, I began this book with the role of prayer in healing a sick person. In later chapters, you will learn what the pharmacy of God is. You will also learn that God created a cure for all diseases from what He created man from. You will learn that people began to use the medicines created by God for their own pleasure, and not for treatment. You will understand that everything that surrounds us was created for the benefit of man. You will understand that Jewish traditional medicine, JTM, and the pharmacy of God are created for you. Pharmacy is a complex of scientific and practical disciplines that study the problems of finding, obtaining, researching, manufacturing, controlling, storing and dispensing a wide variety of medicines and medical supplies. On one of the frescoes in ancient Israel, the word pharmaki is found and means safety, protection in general and from diseases in particular. All occupations related to the manufacture and sale of medicines began to be given names that have the root pharma or pharmaco-. The Lord created Adam from dust. Then the devil came and made 8 holes in the human body with his fingers. When the Lord saw this, he plugged 7 holes with herbs. Since then these herbs have become healing, and left one unplugged, through which he placed the soul in a person, and he closed it with a foxglove flower. Today it is one of the main plants in the treatment of heart disease. Vascular diseases: when a person dies, the soul flies out through this hole, so they say that there are medicinal herbs for all diseases, only death is not cured. There are 9 main openings in the body: in the ears, eyes, mouth, nostrils, genitals, and rectum. In addition to these holes, there is another one, namely, the navel. At the birth of a person, it is closed when the umbilical cord is cut. Through this hole, with the mother's blood, the soul enters the child. It is believed that after death, the soul flies out through this hole. The fact that each person has 7 herbs corresponding to him, by combining which all his diseases can be cured, the ancient Jewish doctors not only knew, but also knew how to determine these herbs. See my stories on YouTube, Pharmacy of God, or in my book with the same name. This book is dedicated to my teachers who gave me knowledge of Jewish traditional medicine, my grandfather Dr. Ion Berkovich and my father Dr. Burl Ionovich, and is a continuation of the previous 1 books, Pharmacy of God. Preparing this book for publication, I set as my goal to fulfill the will of my grandfather and father, who left me a legacy, diaries. These diaries contain knowledge passed down in our family from generation to generation. Many generations of doctors in my family not only carefully kept these diaries, but also supplemented and corrected this knowledge with their experience and discoveries. Jewish traditional medicine is folk medicine, and in it specific signs appeared, reflecting the ethnic identity of the Jewish people. The decision to publish this book was made by our family council. The first edition was in 1980. The circulation of 2,500 sold out in just 1 week. I was able to prepare the second edition only after I managed to take out the archive of my family from the USSR, in parts, and immigrate. As it was said, traditional medicine is one of the most important areas in which specific features are widely manifested, reflecting the ethnic identity of the people. Being part of the traditional culture of the Jews, Jewish traditional medicine embraces its humanitarian spheres, being a vivid example, on the one hand of rational knowledge, on the other hand, of religious and dogmatic practices formed by the specific features of the traditional elements of the spiritual culture of the Jewish society. As I already wrote, the basis for writing this work was the materials, diaries, collected by the family dynasty of doctors in the period from about 1400, as well as archival, literary and folklore data. The collection of material in the diaries was carried out mainly by interviewing specialists in Jewish traditional medicine in different countries, as well as in the towns of the Jewish settlement zone in Ukraine, who are aware of the methods of folk healing. The survey was conducted in the form of individual conversations. The acquisition and accumulation of medical knowledge in Jewish traditional medicine among the Jews took place not only through the transfer of experience from generation to generation, but also through 2 other channels. The first is the systematization of empirical data obtained through trial and error by doctors working in one or another direction of medicine. The second channel is borrowing the experience of other ethnic cultures. Associated with the historical dispersion and residence of the Jewish diasporas among other peoples. Medical knowledge is easily adopted during contacts between different cultures, as it does not carry an additional ideological burden. Although the identification of such borrowings is rather difficult to substantiate, however, in some cases this is facilitated by the preservation of foreign words in the names of diseases and medicines. Plants from ancient times were used by people not only as food, but also for the treatment of various diseases of humans and domestic animals. Plant preparations have been the main medicines not only of Jewish healers and doctors, but of priests, herbalists, sorcerers, and doctors of other nations for many centuries. The doctor has 3 weapons: a word, a plant, a knife. This is what an outstanding doctor of the Middle Ages said. Since plants were the first medicines, among many ancient peoples the words plant, medicine, treatment, healer had a common root or sounded the same. About the poisonous properties of many plants, that they can be not only medicines, but also a deadly poison, people have known since ancient times. Everything is poison, and nothing is without poison. One dose makes the poison invisible. In the popular presentation, everything is poison, everything is medicine, both determine the dose. In another presentation, this phrase sounds more poetic: medicine is poison, but poison is medicine. One dose will turn medicine into poison, and poison into medicine. Doctors of old said so, and doctors say so now. The names of medicinal plants in the past were given mainly according to the properties attributed to them, according to the alleged or real therapeutic and pharmacological action, according to the names of the diseases for which they were used, or according to other properties, edibility, toxicity, taste, smell, etc. In the 18th century, Carl Linnaeus, and other botanists, in the process of creating a unified classification of the plant world, often arbitrarily transferred the ancient names of medicinal plants, indicating a healing effect in certain diseases, to new plants that did not have such medicinal properties. In ancient times, when people were convinced of the effectiveness of a plant against a certain disease or noted the presence of pharmacological properties in preparations from this plant, they gave the plant an appropriate name that carried information about the indications for its use. It should be noted that there are some difficulties in the analysis of folk names. For example, it is not always possible to understand what kind of disease or what symptom, in the name of the plant, we are talking about. The meaning of some names, such as fever, wound or cut grass, does not require explanation. To understand other medical names, you need to know the ancient and obsolete names of diseases. In addition, in the past, drugs were usually treated for individual manifestations of diseases, such as fever, abdominal pain, rash, headache, convulsions, etc., and the presence of these individual symptoms of diseases was an indication for the use of medicinal plants. For example, forest geranium, Geranium sylvaticum L., was used from crowbar in the bones and therefore was called a bone. An indication for the use of dyspnea, or dyspnea herbs, meadow calico, Scabiosa excisa L., was obviously shortness of breath, violation of the frequency and depth of breathing, accompanied by a feeling of lack of air, a common symptom in diseases of the respiratory system, blood circulation, etc. Folk medical names of plants from the position according to their real properties. Plants can be divided into several groups: reliable, doubtful, unreliable, etc. Usually, the names of plants indicating the presence of an emetic, laxative, anthelmintic, diuretic, diaphoretic, hemostatic, analgesic, hypnotic action can be considered quite reliable, because such effects when using medicinal plants, they appear relatively quickly and are easily rechecked. To names associated with delayed effects of treatment, improvement of visual acuity, slowing down the progression of chronic diseases, effect on the ability to conceive children, etc., or with effects that are difficult or impossible to control and prove, for example, blood purifying, anti-aging, protection against the action of poisons or against rabies from animal bites. The authors of this book on JTM, Jewish traditional medicine, like most other doctors, are critical. Finally, there are plant names that are arbitrarily, inaccurately translated from other languages or distorted with a change in the original meaning. Many plant names do not indicate specifically for which disease they should be used. Some of the old names for diseases, such as hernia, ulcers, constipation, hair, hoarseness, hiccups, and others, seem quite understandable at first glance, but the meanings of these words in the past were different from today. The word inflammation widely used in today's speech is a translation of the Latin medical term inflammatio, inflammation, lit. Ignition, arson, which reflects one of the external signs of this pathological process, redness. Until the middle of the 19th century, the word inflammation was used exclusively as a professional medical term. In the literary and colloquial language, inflammatory diseases, the external signs of which were redness and local fever, were called rubella, erysipelas, from the word rose, fever, fever, etc. Another external sign of inflammation, swelling, is reflected in such names, like an abscess, toad, tumor, etc. Pain caused the appearance of such names as sore, hernia, aches, bone fracture, etc. It should be noted that many plant names, from the standpoint of modern science, do not correspond to the meaning embedded in them. The main reason for this is that since ancient times, doctors have used the principle of treating like with like. Pliny the Elder, describing the dragon grass, pointed out that it cures snake bites because it has a spotted leaf color similar to snakeskin. In ancient China, the healing properties of ginseng root were explained by its similarity with the human figure. In the first half of the 16th century, the famous physician and alchemist Theophrastus Bombast Hohenheim, known by the Latin name Paracelsus, proclaimed the doctrine of signatures, where he argued that in the form of a plant there is a resemblance to that part of the human body that this plant can cure. This is a kind of sign, signature, of medicinal plants. Due to its simplicity and clarity, the doctrine of Paracelsus quickly won the recognition of medieval physicians. The so-called sympathetic medicine arose, the fundamental principle of which was, treat like with like. This principle formed the basis of various methods of treatment, as it was logically justified. He facilitated the initial selection of a remedy from a huge number of possible remedies, not only of plant, but also of animal and mineral origin. According to the Jewish doctor, Yitzhak ben Shlomo Israel from Kerwa, his works on medicine, in particular medicines, translated from Arabic into Latin in the 11th century, were used as manuals in Salerno and other European universities. There were recommendations on the use of medicinal plants. For example, based on the similarity of pomegranate and cedar pine seeds to human teeth, the author recommended the use of these seeds for toothache. The heart-shaped fruits and tubers, according to the author, indicated medicinal properties in relation to heart disease, and plants with thread-like leaves were suggested as a remedy for baldness. Plants whose parts resemble the head of a snake, or its forked tongue, were recommended for snake bites, those with a jointed stem, for scorpion stings, plants with yellow juice were supposed to help with jaundice, etc. The situation with unscientific definition of indications for the use of plants was exacerbated by that many plants got their names from such special the features of their appearance, as a resemblance to parts of the body and organs of a person, animal, or bird. In the future, based on names, it was concluded that these plants could be used medicinally for certain diseases. This approach, based on the interpretation of the shape of plant parts, facilitated the choice of a particular medicinal plant for a particular clinical case, but the underlying hypothesis, taken for granted, had no scientific evidence. Today, this hypothesis can be formulated as follows: there is a relationship between the medicinal substances contained in the plant and affecting the diseases of any organ and the external signs of this plant, shape of parts, color, smell, etc. To the best of my knowledge, no scientific studies have been conducted to support this hypothesis. On the other hand, it is well known that the same medicinal substance can be effective in diseases of various organs and systems. For example, this applies to substances with anti-inflammatory, antipyretic, or antibacterial properties. In addition, in one plant there is not one chemical compound with proven or potential medicinal properties, but, as a rule, several. Many of the plants used in scientific and JTM medicine contain potent and poisonous substances. Therefore, quite often the prescription of a medicinal plant, even based on an incorrect hypothesis, for example, on its similarity with organs and parts of the human body, had an objective and subjective therapeutic effect to one degree or another, especially if the doctor and the patient believed in the effectiveness of the medicine used. The positive effect of the application served as an incentive for the subsequent appointment of the plant for the same disease. Negative experience was also considered by healers in their subsequent practice, and a plant that several times did not bring the expected benefit in the treatment of any disease was not used to treat this disease in other patients. The medicine of the past was often based on the personal experience of the doctor, his authority, and the patient's belief in the effectiveness of the treatment. The most reasonable in empirical medicine, in my opinion, was the prescription of medicinal plants based on their taste or smell. Since ancient times, people, not having the technical means to determine the chemical composition of natural objects, have been able to use their organs of taste and smell, tongue and nose for these purposes, the receptors of which are affected by molecules of chemical compounds from objects of the outside world. Sour, burning, pungent plant sap, essential oils, which give a strong smell to the plant, may indicate the presence of antibacterial, antiseptic, hemostatic and irritating effects. Such plants were prescribed externally for the treatment of wounds, skin diseases, for rinsing in diseases of the throat and for oral administration in various diseases of the respiratory and gastrointestinal tract. The choice of natural medicines based on smell and taste was more reasonable and reproducible than the choice based on the external shape of plants and their similarity to parts of the human body. Sometimes the result of these two approaches in choosing a remedy coincided. In such cases, the sign of external similarity of the plant was preferable, because of its visibility and better memorability, and it was mainly fixed in the corresponding names. For plants, the number of which is huge, the ancient Latin expression nomina si nectis paraditi cognitio rerum, if you do not know the names, the knowledge of things will die, is especially relevant. Indeed, it is difficult to describe, but even more difficult to remember any phenomenon or object without naming them. The absence of a short description, the name greatly complicates mutual understanding between people, both in everyday communication and in the transfer of scientific knowledge. Therefore, in relation to plants, they tried to use certain, preferably unique names that would reflect the characteristic external features of the plant or indicate their properties, edibility, toxicity, pungency, the possibility of using it for medicinal and economic purposes, etc. Due to the availability of medicinal plants and their widespread use, the need for knowledge about their use has always been high. This knowledge was transmitted among the people orally from generation to generation, and doctors received knowledge from books. The peculiarity of Jewish traditional medicine is that it consists of three main interrelated parts. The first part of Jewish traditional medicine is information derived from the written and oral Torah. This knowledge relates to nutrition, physical activity, mental health, sexual activity, personal hygiene, methods of prevention and treatment of various diseases. The second part of Jewish traditional medicine is knowledge passed down from generation to generation among hereditary doctors. These invaluable recipes are often originally Jewish and often adapted and improved by the peoples among whom the Jews were scattered. Therefore, these recipes are numerous and varied and differ strikingly depending on the country of dispersion. In the Torah, we find numerous evidence of a high level of development of Hebrew medicine. Unfortunately, most of the written sources, special medical manuals, were destroyed in the biblical era by King Hizkiah so that they would not turn people away from the supreme healer, God. In the Torah, we see numerous evidence that in the biblical era, there were special medical manuals that have not come down to us. Despite the undeniably religious nature of biblical medical concepts in the ability of prayer to bring about a miracle of recovery, much of this knowledge was quite rational. All scholars of the Bible, including Christian ones, note the almost complete absence of magical spells in it, so characteristic of Egyptian and Mesopotamian priestly medicine. But they also note that there is always an unshakable faith in God. The third part of Jewish traditional medicine is the richest heritage of famous Jewish sages and doctors. Thanks to their works, they had a great influence on the development of global culture. Achievements of medicine of the ancient period were summarized in the work written in Hebrew, the Book of Asaph the Physician, presumably created in the late 9th early 10th century. This book contains sections on physiology, information about diseases of various organs of the body, antidotes, information about medicinal plants, advice on hygiene, etc. In the 9th to 10th centuries, a treatise written in Hebrew, Morals of Doctors, appeared. Information has been preserved about several dozen Jewish doctors who especially distinguished themselves during the Middle Ages. These are Ishaq ben Amram, Rabban al-Tabari, Abu Mansur, Ali ibn Rabban, Amathus of Lusitania, Hasdai ben Isaac ibn Shaprat, Yitzhak ben Shlomo Yisraeli from Kerwa, Dunash ibn Tamim, was a Jewish scholar of the 10th century and a pioneer of scientific research among Arabic-speaking Jews, and many others. Among the well-known historical figures of this period, a worthy place belongs to the outstanding Jewish thinker, doctor, and educator Rambam, Rebbein Moshe ben Maimon, in the Arab world, Abu Imran Musa ben Maimon, in European countries, Moses the Egyptian, Moses ben Maimonides. Maimonides lived in the 12th century. For many years he was the personal physician of Al-Fadil, the vizier of Salah ad-Din, the ruler of Egypt. Maimonides left behind several medical writings in which he described his experiences and ideas. In his writings, he dealt with topics such as personal hygiene, massage, hardening, gymnastics. In addition, he paid great attention to the relationship of the physical state with the spiritual world and the emotional sphere. Maimonides especially singled out and supported such methods of therapeutic influences, like meditation and hypnosis, explaining this by the fact that in a trance a person, freeing himself from the intellectual component of consciousness, approaches the highest level of the spiritual sphere, his divine soul. This is the world of healing, based on the unity of everything created by the Almighty. Before creating a disease, the Creator creates a cure. Sickness and healing are in the hands of God. There must be faith in miraculous healing performed directly by God or His messenger, the prophet. The ancient Jews, according to information from the Old Testament and the Bible, used oils to lubricate plague buboes and leprous ulcers, used belladonna for internal diseases, plasters for the treatment of wounds. Much attention was paid to the isolation of patients with leprosy, mentioned in the Bible under the name Zareth. The most prominent physician of the ancient Roman era, Claudius Galen, was a supporter of the active intervention of the doctor throughout the course of the disease and highly valued medicines. He prescribed all sorts of potions to his patients, one harder than the other. The Galenian doctrine of active intervention with the use of drugs was opposed to the expectant tactics of the followers of Hippocrates, who considered the natural healing power, physis, to be the main factor in curing the sick. Some followers of Galen went too far and reached the point of exaggeration. Thus, Alexander from Tralla, while treating one patient, used more than 360 different medicines and mixtures for 2 years. Andromache, physician to Emperor Nero, was inspired by the ideas 300 years before him sung by the Greek poet Nicandros of Colophon in Theriaca, a poem about medicines for animal bites. Andromachus made the famous theriac from 57 ingredients, which became the main weapon of medieval doctors. They increased the number of ingredients to 74, and was considered a universal remedy, a panacea suitable for the treatment of various diseases, from bronchitis to syphilis. History connects the creation of a universal antidote with the name of the Pontic king Mithridates, 123 to 64 BC. Haunted by the fear of being poisoned, he took, in gradually increasing doses, various poisons to become immune to possible poisoning. This idea, apparently, did not belong to Mithridates himself, but to one of the doctors Creighton, who, while conducting experiments with pigeons, ducks, and dogs, noticed that small and repeated doses of poisonous substances cause more and more immunity in these animals. By the way, throughout the history of medicine, many attempts have been made to find a cure for all diseases. So, from ancient times to the end of the Middle Ages, the universal antidote, theriac, was in great demand. It was believed that the miraculous elixir of myrrh, saffron, ginger, opium, cinnamon and 40 other ingredients was made by the Pontic king Mithridates VI. He allegedly was very afraid of poisoning and experimented on criminals to find a drug that protects against all poisons. Subsequently, the recipe of Mithridates was improved by the Roman doctors Andromachus and Galen, adding snake meat to it. and medieval alchemists put the production of theriac on stream. The drug was offered to escape not only from toxins, but also from the plague. The rich paid big money for a tiny dose of the drug, even though its healing properties were not confirmed by anything. In Europe in the 13th to 14th centuries, several medical schools arose, an extensive literature devoted to the fight against diseases spread, not only among educated people, but also among the people. These were mainly books known collectively as hortulus or gortula, from Latin hortulus, garden, small park, with descriptions of herbal medicines. Of great importance in the preservation and dissemination of knowledge about the medical use of medicinal plants had botanical atlases with drawings and descriptions of plants and, often, with recommendations for their use. The theory of disease-causing miasms developed by Hippocrates was developed by medieval doctors of East and West. In the 14th century, miasms were classified. There was rotten miasma generated by the decaying corpses of people and animals. Sick people can also emanate miasma that can infect healthy people. The air of hospitals contains nosocomial miasms, and the fumes from the rotting silt of swamps, large rivers and river deltas contain telluric miasms. Considering these considerations, anti-epidemic measures were developed, special anti-plague attire of doctors was used. The medical faculty in Paris in the 14th century recommended burning large quantities of chamomile flowers in public squares. To destroy the nosocomial miasms, Carl de Belluno and Guy de Chauliac, a doctor at the papal court in Avignon, in 1348 during a plague epidemic prescribed fumigation with mint, lemon and orange peels, myrrh, incense, resin. In addition to sulfur, antimony and arsenic sulfide, the composition of the antimiasmatic disinfectant of the 14th century, recommended for removing the plague from the house, included camphor. These substances were mixed in a kettle with gunpowder and lit. In the 16th century, smallpox patients were disinfected after recovery. First, the whole body was washed with the water of life, boiled water with salt, cloves and iris powder. Then the convalescents passed into a closed room, where there were braziers with hot coals, on which they threw several handfuls of sweet incense, consisting of a mixture of equal parts of myrrh, frankincense, mint, carcazon, resin and sulfur. People had to inhale this fragrant smoke for several minutes. Many rules of sanitation and hygiene were taken from the Bible and aimed at maintaining cleanliness within the city or military camp. For example, hiding excrement. You must have a place outside the camp where you go out. In addition to your weapons, you must have a shovel, and when you sit outside the camp, dig a hole, and bury it again. Strikingly, the prevention of infectious diseases also covered such issues as the sterilization of spoils of war. After the return of the Jews who fought against the Midianites, the priest tells the soldiers the following: "This is the ordinance of the law that the Lord commanded Moses: gold, silver, copper, iron, tin and lead, and everything that goes through the fire, pass through the fire so that it will be cleansed, and besides, you must cleanse with water of cleansing, but everything that does not pass through the fire, pass through the water, and wash your clothes on the seventh day, and be cleansed. And after that enter the camp." In my previously published book, Jewish Stone, I described a medicine that is sold in some pharmacies in Europe to this day. It is called Four Thieves Vinegar. This medicine played a big role in eliminating the epidemic. When using this book, it should be remembered that the information on the use of plants as medicines available in it is given for the purpose of explaining the features of Jewish traditional medicine. This information, which is given in this book, should not be used for self-treatment without first obtaining professional medical advice. In Jewish traditional medicine, doctors have always paid great attention not only to what a person eats, but also what a person drinks. Kashrut of drinks determined that alcoholic drinks were made only on alcohol. To obtain healing drinks, various concentrations of alcohol were used. Depending on the combination of herbs, roots, and fruits of plants, as well as the concentration of alcohol used, various alcoholic drinks were created. These drinks were created as medicines. When creating the drink, not only the medicinal substances that were part of it were considered, but also the smell and color. Jewish doctors since ancient times knew not only about the impact of aromatherapy on a person, but also about the role of color therapy in treatment. A feature of the approach to treatment with herbal preparations in the tradition of Jewish traditional medicine from antiquity to the present is the use of a plant or parts of a plant in only the form in which God created them. The isolation of certain substances from the plant, as recommended by Dr. Galen, was never recognized by Jewish medicine. Jewish doctors from ancient times believed that nothing could be created better than God created. The composition of each plant contains everything necessary for this plant to exist and benefit people. Everything that God created is useful. Perhaps we just do not yet know everything about the world that surrounds us. I once asked a well-known rabbi, on David Yellin Street in the Meir Einaim Yeshivat, where the Hasidim of Rachmistrivka were based at that time, why Jews are forbidden to eat fish that does not have scales or fins. The answer was simple: I don't know. Only God knows what he put into it when creating it. The blessing of this rabbi then played a big role in my destiny. My Jewish traditional medicine teachers, my grandfather Dr. Ayan Berkovich and my father Dr. Burl Ayanovich, never accepted any diets. Food and drinks should be different. Monotony in nutrition is harmful. You need to pay attention not only to what you eat and drink, quality, but also in what quantity and when. Dietitians, doctors are not gods, they cannot create something similar to what God created. Weight loss dietitians are doing a lot of harm to a lot of people. I don't mean when people with certain diseases are told to limit or not eat certain foods. The tradition of Jewish traditional medicine from antiquity to the present is the use of alcohol for medicinal purposes. The process of its production has been unchanged since the discovery of the distillation process by the alchemists of ancient times. Alcohol was used to prepare various infusions from medicinal herbs and plants. Then the result of the distillation process was called much more beautiful: aqua vitae, water of life. Aquavit is the true name of alcohol obtained by distillation without specifying the features of technological processing. The process of obtaining aquavit has changed minimally since the Middle Ages. The raw material for distillation, no matter what it is obtained from, mash, beer, malt, wine, etc., contains a certain percentage of ethyl alcohol. The boiling point for alcohol and water is different. Alcohol evaporates faster. Vapors saturated with alcohol are discharged through the tube and cooled, condensing into a liquid. First the alcohol evaporates, then the water. To get almost pure alcohol, you need at least 2 distillations, and Irish whiskey is distilled even 3 times to make the final product even purer. The distillation process is common for all varieties of strong alcohol and differs only in nuances. You can get alcohol from almost anything, but the raw material determines the quality. The best alcohol comes from grains and fruits, the worst from potatoes and beets. After purification, alcohol is diluted with water to the desired strength. The recipes for alcoholic infusions described below, their components, methods of production, and even the effect of drinking such alcohol no longer correspond to the tastes and habits of the population of the 20th centuries. This is because, according to the founders of Jewish traditional medicine, alcohol infusions were not at all intended to relieve stress and banal intoxication. They were intended and used for medicinal purposes, in religious rituals and magical practices. The recipes in this book have been collected by generations of doctors over many years and reflect the traditions of Jewish traditional medicine of Jewish settlements in different countries and among different peoples. I especially want to draw attention to the Jewish places in Ukraine where vodka was used very often. Vodka is a water alcohol solution, considered the Russian national alcoholic drink. Vodka is a clear liquid with the smell and taste of alcohol and consists of only 2 components, rectified or distilled ethyl alcohol and water. With the development of the chemical industry and technology in the 19th century, the production of rectified alcohol became possible. Unlike distillate alcohol, rectified alcohol was chemically purer and much cheaper. It was possible to produce such alcohol from almost anything: potatoes, beets, sawdust, hydrolytic alcohol. The rectification method produced alcohol with a strength of up to 96 degrees, the content of fuel oils that give taste and smell was extremely reduced, and the volumes and speed of production using this technology were simply incomparable with production using distillation technology. And it was economic reasons that led to the fact that vodka distillate was completely replaced by rectified vodka. Vodka distillate was a food drink that had its own taste and smell. Rectified vodka itself has no taste, it is drunk not for the sake of taste, but for the sake of alcohol. Rectified vodka is drunkenness for the sake of drinking. The vodka given in the recipes in this book is vodka distillate. The spirit given in the recipes in this book is distilled spirit. Standardization of the strength of vodka was carried out under Tsar Peter I, and at that time it was 38 to 39 degrees. To check the quality and prevent attempts to dilute it, it was heated and set on fire. Half of a quality product burned out, and since the combination of alcohol with water has its own characteristics, the alcohol content in it was the same 38 to 39 degrees. If you mix a liter of alcohol and a liter of water, the resulting volume will be less than 2 liters. Because it will not be a mixture of water and alcohol, but an alcohol hydrate. An alcohol hydrate molecule is much smaller than water and alcohol molecules in a separated state. And one more feature, there are many such alcohol hydrates, depending on its concentration, and their properties are also different. Mendeleev in his work on the combination of alcohol with water proved that the solution with a weight content of alcohol of 46% corresponds to the greatest compression. With this ratio, the volume of the solution is minimal.